This is Pop Culture Yearbook. On this show, we pick pieces of pop culture that were important to us in a given year. We then discuss memories and dig into those movies, albums, shows, and more. I'm Brad.
I'm Pete.
And I'm GIF.
All right, and I tried to switch that up last week. It was a bad idea, I realized. So we're back on the just read the script, man.
Yeah,
Just read
stick
the
to the
script.
script.
Stick to the script.
Make it more complicated than it needs to be.
And the script this month is TV shows. And we're
Yes,
going to
it is.
start with the first one tonight. And it's going to talk a lot about memories we had. And then we'll get into some more later on, too. GIF, what are we doing?
Tonight, again, we are in 1990, and we are covering the Wonder Years. this
Are we in
season.
1990 or are we in 1968?
Yes, well, yeah.
Well, this
This,
would be
well,
like-
in 1990,
well-
we would have been watching 1970.
Yeah.
On the Wonder
Although we
Years.
watched an episode from 2 different seasons. So
We did.
we
We
watched
did.
both.
So tonight, what we're going to be covering, we're going to cover the pilot, and then we're also going to take one from season 3 that was in 1990. So we'll kind of get into that. So right off the bat, just a little background. So this show takes place 20 years before present day. So it premiered in 88. So the first season took place in 68. So that's kind of what they had cooking on that. But of course, the first thing we do in any show is we talk about our memories of the subject we're on. So this show is on ABC. So of course I got to watch it, and it premiered right after Super Bowl 22 on ABC, January
did it?
31st. Yep.
I guess I didn't remember that.
So
Which
this
Super Bowl was that? That would have been the Broncos
Uh,
Redskins. So it should have the Super Bowl. The Vikings should have won.
There you go.
Yep, that's the one. Right
Yes.
after Doug Williams went nuts. That was when this
Mhm.
came out.
So of course, the main character Kevin Arnold, he was 12 years old in 1968. This comes out in 88. At the time it came out, I was still 11, but I turned 12,
We were 12.
in 1988, and so
Hold
I
on.
just
The timing actually hits that window where Brad was 12, I was
Mhm.
still 11.
Yep. So
It's
just-
Actually, no,
completely
January 22nd.
gap.
I turned 12 6 days later. So,
I thought you
No,
said
it's
January
31st.
oh, I
31st.
just turned 12.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's
Math
that
checks out.
3-week window when Brad was older than I was.
So for
Anyway,
me, this one, really struck close to home, with the main character being the exact age that I am, going in the grade that I was in. So I loved it. It was appointment television for me on ABC every week, and just remembered, relating well to Kevin. I wasn't the most popular kid in school. I wasn't the
Yes,
best
you were. Come on.
student.
You were right
Um,
up there.
But and I always tried to outkick my coverage with the girls, so you kind of related well to this kid, and it was just a lot of fun watching him go through a lot of the same things that you're going through it at that exact time in your life. So those are some of my memories. How about you guys?
Gifford is playing himself off like he wasn't the popular one. And do you have any idea who you're talking to here?
Go ahead, Paul.
All right.
I think it's pretty clear that in this group here, Pete was the Paul of the group.
That's probably true. Yeah.
Right. And is there a
Me
better
and Gifford
best
were both
friend?
kind of the- we were both kind of the Kevin.
Yeah, but is there a better best friend in the world than Paul Pfeiffer?
Nope, he's great. Pete's
Right,
great.
thank you.
Pete's
Yeah,
great too.
Thanks.
I mean, come on.
Appreciate That. I actually, I'd seen the show before, of course, but I didn't watch it religiously like you did, and I certainly don't remember any of the specific episodes. I remember the show, but I remember
Interesting.
nothing about it. And so watching it this time was like a new experience for me, and I thought it was great. It's actually one that, because my wife and daughter like to watch these kinds of shows, right? They just got done watching like every episode of Young Sheldon, and now the new season is out. And it sort of is a little bit in that same vein. It's different, very different, but it's a little bit about it's what you might describe as a coming of age type type show as well. So
Hint.
it's one that I might actually sit down and get my family and say, hey, we should all watch this together.
I'd be interested to see if they would watch it and be liking it, because I have some thoughts about the audience, and I found it interesting to watch it now at this age. So,
Right.
Are you done, Pete, or not?
Yeah, I'm done. Go.
Okay. So, and the person that I do remember talking about this with the most was Gifford. So it's interesting to hear you say that you didn't watch it much, or I mean, so apparently you weren't in those conversations, because I feel like all of us watched the show and talked about it. I described it in my notes here as this was the original water cooler show for us as kids. We would watch it and we would come to school and we would talk about it all the time. And we would talk about Winnie and Becky and which one we thought was cuter and which one you'd want to go out with. But I guess that wasn't as much with Pete. It was more with you. But there were other people too that watched it. There were, I think, Rhonda, hi Rhonda, and some girls liked it as well. So that's what I loved about it. It was the perfect timing of that show. We were the exact same age as these kids, so it was so relatable, and they did nail like the whole relationships and how kids try to, like, go out with each other and the awkwardness of the school. And Kevin's not a big nerd, but like he's, like you said, he's not comfortable, and that would describe me all the way. But he was always aspiring to things, and that describes me too. So I mean, I loved the show at that time. I did not watch it through to the end though. So what I remember is I watched it a lot in middle school, and then the show was still on in high school, but I'm pretty sure I, like, at some point I quit and like totally lost interest in it. And so I was curious to see what I'd think going back now. Like, I was really excited to watch it, knowing how much I loved it. And so what I was noticing, what I was asking Pete there is, I find it really weird to think about who the audience was for this show. Like,
it was just you, Gifford. Just you. It was all for you.
Well, no,
but it was
wasn't.
set in 1968. So
Right.
it's like, well, why would we give a shit about that? So it's like the audience is more the adults from that time period looking back, you'd think. And so it feels like it straddles two audiences, but doesn't really speak directly to either one. And I think that's why I loved it for a while, but kind of, gave up on it. And looking back on it now, I did not enjoy it as much. I did watch a bunch of episodes. But I couldn't, at first I was like, man, this isn't as good as I remembered. But then there was some I liked too. It was just interesting to watch it and think about the audience, like who was supposed to watch this show. Like, how many shows do they make prime time that are directed to 12-year-olds? I mean, there aren't many. That's Saved by the Bell, and that's a daytime show. That's not a serious kind of dramedy show. So
That's
I
what
feel
I
like
think
that during the 80s and probably the 80s and into the 90s a little bit, there's a number of shows that played off of nostalgia.
Yeah.
Like Happy Days, for example, was probably the original one that did that went back to the 50s. And it, due to the popularity, I think that spawned a few other ones. And there's some movies too I can think of, and then it fell kind of in that realm. I don't know if there's that much today.
Even though I didn't grow up at that time, that factored in. I did like that, like the music in this show, and like learning about like the Vietnam War, and that even though we were like 20 years past that, I did like that, and I did get into that. So for whatever reason, I was interested in that nostalgia factor, even though it had nothing to do with us personally.
Well, and that was kind of one of the things that they wanted to do, was set it 20 years in the past to pull in some of the baby boomers in that nostalgic way, but also gear it towards the kids. Because I mean, there's plenty of shows that are like that were in prime time. I mean, I would consider Who's the Boss and Growing Pains.
Well,
I mean, there was adults in that, but also
to me,
it went around the kids.
To me, the difference is this one really centers on the kids all the way. There's a lot of family shows, like I consider those family shows, and the adults. Tony Danza's the star of Who's the Boss,
Sure.
and the star is Fred Savage, and it revolves entirely around him, and the parents are in there, and so the parents might watch, and certain episodes might speak to them a little more, but a lot of them are really about kids in school. And so that's just, I don't know, that's what I caught on to this time watching it through.
Sure. So this show, the first season was only 6 episodes. It like I say, it debuted end of January after the Super Bowl and only ran for 6 episodes. But that season, those 6 episodes were good enough to win it a Primetime Emmy for Best Outstanding Comedy Series. And Fred Savage, at the age of 13, was the youngest ever nominee for Best Lead Actor in a Comedy Series. Throughout the run of the show, it did win 4 Emmys and was nominated for 28. And like Brad said, for us, like these kids were our exact same age. Fred Savage was born on July 9th, 1976, 5 days after me. I mean, you want to talk
Wow.
about being the exact same age. I mean, that's about as close as you can get. So we can, I figure we get into the cast a little bit here. Of course, Fred Savage is Kevin Arnold, our star of the show.
Hot off the Princess Bride.
Well, and when the creators of the show started casting, they went to 5 different casting directors, and all 5 of them recommended Fred Savage for the role. Like,
Wow.
just that's it. Like, you need this kid right here. So
And
he
what
was
year
the early.
you
front
have?
runner.
He did one of those like body switching movies. Do you
Vice
remember-
versa.
Was that before this?
Yep.
Like,
so
he had already been in. I mean, he was in The Princess Bride, obviously,
Yep.
but this is a bigger role.
So the writers didn't know him, and they actually got a rough cut of Vice Versa and watched it. They didn't watch The Princess Bride. Why would you watch
Well, he doesn't have a
Better-
big part.
better?
Although
Well,
he's
yeah.
good. He's
He's
memorable.
great in it. So
He
I
is,
mean,
but-
they saw him in that and said, okay, yeah, I think he's our kid.
But now,
one of
hold
those
on,
movies-
hold on.
Yeah.
Whatever actually like became of him? You know, I've seen him in other kind of bit roles and everything, but he never really became
No,
He's
any
a behind
bigger
the
than that. He
scenes
kind of
TV
peaked
guy.
there. Okay.
Yeah,
he
he's in the
he was
industry.
Mole Man in Austin Powers.
Yes. Mole, 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 mole. More.
I think he's
Oh.
kind of like we talked about Christmas Story, kind of like Peter. I don't know what he
Yep.
does, but Peter Billingsley, great child actor, big star,
Sure.
in that movie. But he went on, and he's still huge in Hollywood, but it's not in like a lot of acting roles.
And maybe that's just not what he wanted to do. And
Well, he did. Like,
There's
for
nothing wrong with
example,
that.
recently he directed 8 episodes of the reboot of the Wonder Years.
Okay.
So
I think he also probably got being a TV show for 6 years. He probably got a little typecast. Like it's easier if you're in a movie to like
Mhm.
move on, but like once you're Kevin Arnold for that long, I think a lot of kids get like look at like Alyssa Milano for she was
Right.
big and Who's the Boss, but she never did a whole lot with movies or anything after
well,
that.
that's what you
'cause-
see with adult actors. Like, look at the Seinfeld characters. Seinfeld actors, it's really difficult for Jason Alexander to
unless
be
you're Julia
in-
Louis Dreyfus.
Yeah,
and
unless
everything
you're
yeah,
Julia
she is
Louis-Dreyfus.
old.
But even she struggled at first. She tried a bunch of different things that didn't really take off.
So Fred,
Right. So
Fred
I think that's
Savage-
part of the story with him.
Fred
Yeah,
Savage has 73 directing credits as a TV director. And like multiple episodes within those 73 credits. So that's kind of where he's made his mark in recent years.
And
So-
little foreshadowing, he also, and in the same season, directed or hosted an episode of Saturday Night Live, which we will discuss in some detail next week.
Oh, excellent.
Hmm.
So moving on with the cast, we got Danica McKellar, who plays, of course, Winnie Cooper. And she was picked in a coin toss over her sister, Crystal McKellar.
Which I just learned is who played Becky Slater, and I didn't even know that till
Last night.
because you don't look at them and think they have different colored hair, and like you think
Mm-hmm.
of them as opposites, but yeah, they're sisters.
Yeah, they're about a year and a half apart. Crystal is younger by
Yep.
yeah, and so they made a role of Becky Slater because they liked her so much. So they brought her on.
So you never knew that either.
I didn't know it till it blew me away.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
We've got Dan Lauria plays Jack Arnold, the father. A little more gruff. The working man, works work, traffic's traffic. A little more stern.
And I think
Norma-
he
oh, go ahead.
fits that
Mhm.
when you think of the dads of that era, like he's a very stereotypical.
Absolutely.
Like that's what you think. He brings the money, but he's upset. He's not very close to his kids, but he's a good guy and he's a good. It's just the way they were, and he,
Mhm.
he plays that role to a T.
Yep. Allie Mills plays Norma Arnold, the mom in this show. I got to tell you, watching this back, Norma, she's got a little something going on.
She's an attractive lady.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, she's kicking
Probably
it.
didn't think that when we were 12, but yeah, no, you
Right.
see it now. It's a whole new lens.
Did not see it when I was 12. The oldest sister, Karen, played by Olivia Diabo. Fun character. She's the flower child. Always
She's
pressing
the black
limits.
sheep.
Yep, for sure. Well, and that's saying something considering we've got Wayne, played by Jason Hervey, and oh my God, he is such a D-bag, and he plays it so perfectly. You guys grew up with an older brother.
Well,
and
that
an
was a
older
good.
sister.
I was going to say that was another reason why I think I could relate so much is that there was 3 kids, 5 in the family. The only difference is my brother was older than my sister, but like the ages and the setup was so similar to my own family that's another reason I think I connected
Right.
to it, especially as a kid.
My siblings were even older than Brad's siblings, so
Yep.
it's like I
Well-
was basically an only child by the time that I was 10 years old.
Well, and like I didn't have an older sister, but my brother was 2 years older than me. Wayne is 2 years older than Kevin in this show. But my brother was nothing like Wayne. If you were going to compare, I would maybe be closer to Wayne in our relationship. Always the instigator, the little prick, to
Yep,
my,
that too.
to my brother. So
A little prick.
got to apologize to my brother again for being not always great. We got Josh Saviano plays Paul.
You mean Marilyn
and-
Manson?
And of course, there was rumors about him being Marilyn Manson. Of course, Marilyn Manson, I think, is 6 years older than Paul.
Yeah, I was looking at that.
Saviano.
Like Marilyn Manson's first album came out in like '94. This kid is not old enough to do that if that was supposed to
Right.
be him.
Well,
But it's
and
funny
one of
because you look at his IMDb and he disappeared. He did nothing until one TV show as an adult. So it almost adds up to that myth. Like, where did he go? What did he do?
Well, and when you say he did nothing, so like at the final episode, they're doing the narrator is doing a voiceover of what happens to all these characters. Paul went on to Harvard to become a lawyer. Well, Paul Saviano actually went to Yale
Josh
and became,
Saviano.
and Josh Saviano went to Yale to become a lawyer. So,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say he
Because-
did nothing.
Well, I know acting
pretty
was.
good.
He left
Acting.
acting. He did a Cameron
Sure.
Diaz. He left and disappeared.
Sure.
By the way,
good
was it
for him. If he did a
deliberate?
Cameron Diaz, good for him.
We might have even talked about this. Is it deliberate or is it just something that is a coincidence? Did they base Milhouse off of him? The Simpsons character Milhouse?
No, because this came out the
Because
same
he's
time.
so
They
it's
came
so.
out right at the same time. Yeah.
But did Milhouse was he in the earliest episodes though?
That's a good question. No, I've never thought
Because it
that,
just
but-
seems too perfect that he is like the exact same character and he
Yeah.
looks the same.
Well,
kind
I
of.
think he's smarter. I mean, Milhouse is pretty dumb, isn't he?
Yeah, it's pretty stupid.
I mean, he's a big nerd, but he's not
Yeah.
like a
he was
smart. But I
Yeah,
see,
I don't
especially the
know.
looks. Like there's a connection there.
That's what
for
I
sure.
kept thinking. Though. He's like the same role in both the shows. The dad kind of reminds me a little bit of a normalized Homer Simpson
Yeah,
too.
no, I can see that too. Well, and the guy, what's the guy's name that does Homer's voice? It's
Oh, I can see his face.
Castellanato, Dan Castellanato,
Yes.
something like
oh,
that.
okay, it's Dan. Well, then who's Dan Hedaya? Isn't he a Simpsons voice too?
Well,
no, that's the guy
Dan-
from Cheers.
but it's Dan Loria is the actor's name.
Yeah,
So
I know.
there's
It's
a-
just I see what Pete's putting down here.
Yeah. The last one I wanted to bring up is Daniel Stern did a wonderful job as the narrator in this show. Did you guys have anything else?
I don't even think I knew that was Daniel Stern. I didn't know that.
Oh, you never knew that? I suppose if you didn't watch
Really?
it, that would be.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And it's it comes out before he really we wouldn't have known him until Home Alone and
Home
City
Alone.
Slickers and which came later.
Mhm.
I did have a list though, if you want to do it now. I went through because I noticed a couple, and then I went through the IMDb. All these other actors, young actors who appeared on the show.
Yes.
So if you'd like me to share that.
Please do. Yes, there's a
Okay,
lot of
So
them
it
in there.
started because I watched after episode 1. I did watch episode 2 right away, and all of a sudden, this girl that Kevin's trying to go to the dance with gets taken away, and it's just a quick pick of him. Like, that's Zach Morris, who
Yes.
plays Brad.
Yep.
So you got Mark Paul Gosselaar there, and so then I started looking. So Juliette Lewis had a recurring role. She was
Wayne's girlfriend.
what's his name's the older brother's girlfriend.
Wayne, yep.
I saw one episode where she was in it. David Schwimmer was on a few episodes.
Mhm.
Towards the end of the run, Giovanni Ribisi was on several. Ben Stein, Peter Billingsley, speaking of, was on the
Yep.
show. Seth Green, I saw one with him on it. Dustin Diamond, Screech himself.
He was the one who was getting picked last with Paul in gym class.
Not Alan Thicke, but Robin Thicke.
Oh, really?
Carlo Gugino, who was in Son-in-Law and has been in a lot of other things. She was on the show once. Jim Caviezel, Christ.
Uh-huh.
Paul
Jesus.
Gleason from, Die Hard and Breakfast Club and all the 80s movies. John Corbett, who was on Northern Exposure and
Yes.
Sex and the City.
was
Salil
in the first
Moonfry,
season.
Punky Brewster.
Mhm.
Paul Dooley, the dad from 16 Candles, and also was in Strange Brew, which I just watched recently.
Excellent.
Pete Brecken Meyer was on the show, and Blossom
really?
Mayim Bialik. So a couple older people, but so many of these kids that you knew later on that went on to some bigger shows, a lot of them were on this show in little bit parts, and some were recurring roles too. And it was fun to, and I saw some of the episodes where they were in too, which is really cool to see.
Sure.
So that's
Yeah,
my
they're-
list.
lot of great young actors and actresses. Of course, with older shows, we always talk about the opening credits, and this show I think was one of the more fun ones, with Joe Cocker's rendition,
And the
which
home
is
movies.
not on Hulu, unfortunately.
No.
That really sucks. But again, this was something I could relate to because the beginning is just a bunch of clips of the kids running around and the family with the silent film.
Well, and there you
And that
go.
was something that my uncle brought to Christmases when I was
Yep.
little.
Even though we didn't grow up in the 60s, as a kid in the 80s, we would watch old home videos that my parents had similar to these with no, and I loved that right from a young age. I loved that nostalgia and watching those things.
Christmas
so that's-
is a time of year.
Probably another reason why, that spoke to me.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
But the music, you bring up the opening credits, the song, but the first scene of the show is Turn, Turn, Turn. And again, as a kid, I grew up listening to old music and 60s and 50s music. And so even though that wasn't of the time, I loved that. And I loved listening. We had 8 tracks and we had the Time Life classics. And so I love that music. And then, the thing that really nailed all that was Forrest Gump a few years later. But
Yeah.
this is kind of like pre-Forrest Gump with the nostalgia and the music and everything.
I feel like
Right.
we even sang that song, Turn, Turn, Turn.
We did.
We did.
Eighth grade.
We did like a
choir.
whole medley of those songs.
Yep.
in
Sure.
choir.
Yep. And that was one of them that was in there. What was I just going to get into? Shoot.
Pilot.
Well, yeah, I was going to get into the pilot, but I had a couple other things as far as one of the things. So, of course, what I also like about this show, you've got the voiceover with Daniel Stern. So that brings in memories of Christmas Story and Stand By Me. So very reminiscent of that. And then one of the shows later on in life that I really loved was Scrubs. So you had this internal
Yes.
monologue. And then also you had fantasy scenes with Kevin, which again is a lot of fun. Scrubs did that, borrowed from that as well. So just the way, the format of the show itself, having those two features of the narrator and the fantasy sequences were just absolutely wonderful.
And I think again too, just the whole 20 years thing. We grew up, we were almost forced to be interested and learn about the 60s. Like we grew up with it, even though we didn't grow up in it. We knew the music and it was like on the radio and we heard all the news stuff, which it's so weird to think like now this show, would be set in 2004. And like, what would that look like? Like how would it even look hardly any different other than, you pull a few songs from that time,
Right.
which we're going to do next month. So this is
People
perfect
would
timing.
People would have flip phones and
Yeah, I mean, there'd be little things like that, but like the big stuff, like the Vietnam War and the hippies and the flower child and the politics. I mean,
Well,
you have George Bush, but what story is there to tell there? And there's no nostalgia.
Well,
there's no
we got a
positive
war.
look back.
We got
was
a
a
war
war.
there.
We had
Yeah.
the Iraq War.
But you don't look back on it. I don't know. It's so weird to think how these shows felt so long before at that time, and now you think that doesn't seem like that long ago at all.
Well, because we were 12.
I know.
And, so 20
but does it
years
feel
was a
like
long
the
time ago.
decades are all distinct and different? Like
No,
I know.
every decade,
I think about that. Yeah.
Because
every
that's the
decade in the
whole point of your
1900s seemed to
formative
be
years.
distinct.
Right, because
Since
they were our formative
2000,
years.
there's nothing unique about the decades. You cannot define the decades.
No, nothing
Like you
major.
could.
I don't think.
No.
I think that happens with everybody as you get older and you have the same routine year in and year out. You have the same job, live in the same house. Everything kind of becomes a little more mundane.
I guess it'd be
and
interesting to
monotonous.
talk to some of the middle schoolers and say, hey, because some of them are interested, and like, so how do you look back on 20 years ago? And it probably would look different to them, I guess. But
Sure.
I mean, I have a few kids in school that are like into that music, and so I'm sure they have a different outlook then.
So we're gonna hop into the pilot episode. So right off the bat, the first thing we hear is it's 1968, and I'm 12 years old. So again, like we said, this pulls the three of us right in 1988 and being 12 years old, and it really sets up the show like a good pilot does. It introduces all our characters. We see Kevin in the home movies. That's me right there. I'm not a bad athlete. Kind of telling him the people about him and introducing his brother and his best friend Paul. And Winnie, it just does a nice little condensed way of introducing these characters. And we see that,
and a lot happens in this first episode too.
It does.
Yeah,
it does. They really pack a lot in. He grows up in the suburbs, just like so many other people in the same house on the same street as so many other people, really trying to do its best to appeal to a very broad audience. That was one of the other things. They didn't want to specify the town that they're in. They wanted to be kind of an any town USA.
But it is a New York suburb, right? I think that's been that.
Well,
it's
one of the creators wanted it to be where he grew up in New York, but obviously it's more out in California. There's no snow, it's always warm weather. You can see the mountains in the background in their
well, I guess I don't remember. I didn't watch too many episodes, but I felt like there was one where they left town, but it felt like they were in like northern New York, like that's where they were going. So I feel like, Pete's again kind of right on that, but I didn't know if it was ever stated somewhere during the series.
I thought
where
it
they
was
never.
Because
It
there
was
a
never
couple of things I was wondering it during these episodes. It was mentioned at some point, I thought, because I was like, oh, they're in New York. On top of the fact that he's a Jets fan, he has a Jets jacket. So, it doesn't mean it has to be.
But the license plates are California plates. When Wayne gets his license, it's for Culver City. I mean, so they're.
Well,
I think they tried to appeal to such a large audience by, not really being too specific. But
it's funny you bring that up because my favorite show, The Brady Bunch. I've read so much about it. Like they intended that to be anywhere in the country, yet it's so obviously California. Everything about they go to the beach and they go. I mean, everything about this show is clearly set in California and Hollywood. But supposedly, if you listen to like Greg and Peter and talk about it, that was the producers were clearly stating this show does not take place anywhere specific. It could be middle of America, and so I think the Wonder Years did a little better job of pulling that off than the Brady Bunch did.
Yes. So we learn right away how much of a douche Wayne is while they're outside playing football in the street, and he's giving his brother a hard time about how Winnie's his girlfriend and how he wants to give her a big French kiss. And I mean, Wayne never misses an opportunity in this show to embarrass his little brother in whatever way he can. And that is brought to light right away in the series.
That is how I remember it too. But after watching a few more, I did feel like, I mean, they actually have a decent relationship, and there are times where they are more brothers too, which was because I thought he was just a jerk the whole time from what I remembered, but I felt like there was a little more to their relationship than that if you watch, the whole series.
Oh, for sure. But they're setting you up to let you know that Wayne is going to be not his, best friend throughout the the series.
No, I know. No, he's definitely always antagonizing him.
So another thing that really drew me into this show was that the coolest guy on their block was named what?
Brian Cooper.
Brian. There's a cool Brian in a show for the first time ever, evidently. So Brian Cooper, Winnie's brother, played by Bentley Mitchum, who is the grandson of Robert Mitchum.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So a very small part
the original Max Caddy.
Yeah.
The original Cape Fear.
So I like that there's a cool Brian. It always stands out to me whenever there's a cool.
Well,
Brian,
and then in this episode too, Zach Morris plays a cool Brad. So we all are covered here in this.
We're set.
It's probably
It
why
is
we like
based off of us.
So I like how they show a lot of the things that young kids of the age of 12 do. I like that they're sitting in Kevin's room, him and Paul, and they've got, was that Karen's like book or something with the nude girls? It was like a health magazine or something.
Oh, yeah, it
And of
was
course
like a technical book.
Yeah, it is.
Like a textbook.
As
but
soon as
they're-
mom knocks on the door and lets herself in, Paul's trying to shove it underneath himself so she doesn't see what they're looking at. That was outstanding.
Well,
I
then in a
think
later
you
episode that I
passed
watched.
over.
Oh.
Oh, sorry. I was just
Go
going to
ahead.
say you passed over a point earlier in the show that I thought defined who the dad was. It was when he first comes home from work and he's in a bad mood and is like he did not want to piss him off or anything, and he's making himself a drink. And then the daughter says, "Oh, I need birth control pills, so we can talk about that."
Right.
That's the way that he just looks, that glare without saying a word.
Yep, before erupting. The other thing I liked in that scene too was Paul was staying over for dinner, and of course he can't eat anything because he's allergic to everything. But I like how Jack comes into the kitchen, sits down in his spot at the dinner table, just looks over, sees Paul, and just goes, "Hello, Paul." Not menacing
Yeah.
or anything, just like, "Hey,
Paul's just always there.
yep, how are you doing?" Just hello, Paul.
That book they were reading, though, that I watched an episode later where it was all about they went and bought the book, Everything You Always Wanted to Know
Yeah.
About Sex, but were afraid to ask.
Yes.
And they got it. And then the mom found it. And then she got mad at him because she thought he went through her drawer because she had the book in the drawer. And so they were both like seeing each other differently.
What I love is the voiceover directly after that, where he goes, "I wonder what her thought was when she went back to her room and found her copy."
Yeah, right.
But neither of us spoke of it again. It's just, so good. So, first day of school, 7th grade, this is junior high for them. Of course, it would have been middle of middle school for us. But, the first day of school, you got to dress to impress. And of course, his outfit that he comes out into the kitchen in is, he looks like he's disco fever.
Like a
And
pimp.
this was one spot where Wayne, being a douche, saved him so much embarrassment, because Wayne laughing at him that hard in the kitchen woke his ass up that, okay, I got to quit trying so hard. Because
Reminded
if he
me
would
of
have worn that,
the day in high school where me and Chad Drake wore overalls and we wore one up and one down and we thought we were going to be so cool. And by noon, it was a disaster. I never wore them again.
yeah. Well, and what I really like about this, Kevin obviously put a lot of work into what he thought he was going to wear to school the first day. Winnie's bringing the heat first day of 7th grade.
Well, and they set that up well because she is so tiny when the show starts, and she's got those long braids and she's got the glasses, so
Just
she
like
looks
a
like
nerd
just
girl.
this tiny little kid still and this nerd. And then they set that up because the first day she's got her hair down and she looks like a whole new person.
Yeah. And I just love how he doesn't recognize her until she actually comes up and says hello to him. He was just, this is fresh meat, somebody who's even more lost than we are. And yeah, that was outstanding. The other thing I like is how when he gets to school and he's in homeroom, Again, another comment on Wayne here. The homeroom teacher comes up and asks if he is Kevin Arnold, brother of Wayne, and that he has his work cut out for him because of how awful Wayne has been in his time at the junior high.
And that can work both ways too, because I always felt I had my work cut out for me because my siblings were so successful and good at everything. So,
oh, so you needed to have a brother like me who he wasn't necessarily great at the grades, but all the teachers loved him. So I was coming in with a clean slate, and then I disappointed every single one of them.
oh, good Lord.
We get to meet PE teacher Ed Cutlip. He is a great character in the first few seasons of this show. A very peculiar teacher, but a lot of laughs are had at his expense.
Well, he's trying to teach sex ed, so he's out of his element.
Right. Yeah, later on when he teaches sex ed. But it touches on so many themes in this first one for kids of that age. Kevin has first period gym, which is the worst time to have gym because, as he says, you gotta you shower before school, and then you get to school and you're sweaty.
Yep.
Yeah, and then you got to get showered up, and you stink the rest of the day, and that's just awful. They get into the cafeteria ecosystem, which is universal for everybody. And then of course crushes with between him and Winnie and his brother giving him a hard time and him flipping out because he can't admit that he really does like Winnie. So they do a good job of hitting a lot of broad themes and fun stuff in this very first episode.
Well, you skipped over one that brought back a lot of memories. I know you'll see where I'm going here, but when they in Fayed, when they start teaching what a jockstrap is, brings back memories. That's all I'll say.
So what I loved about this is when he's trying to fight his way through an explanation of what a jockstrap is, and he gets done, and they go to Cutlip, and he's just sitting there with this dumbfounded look on his face, and then he looks over to the side, like he's looking for somebody, like what the hell, just that little eye movement absolutely killed me. That actor was so good. He actually tried out to be the dad. He tried out for Jack's character, and they said he was too young to play the dad. But I was glad that he was included in this show because he's got a lot of good stuff in this, for sure. So the end of the episode, Kevin has gotten into trouble at school. He threw an apple into the lunchroom, which is a pretty ballsy move.
It was a very ballsy move.
Yeah. And he gets into trouble, gets called in the principal's office. His parents have to come pick him up at school. And he's going to get his, a beat when he gets home from Jack. Yep. And when they get home, Karen and Wayne come out of the house, and they are, quite distraught. Something major has happened. And it turns out that Brian Cooper, who was drafted and sent off to Vietnam, has been killed in action. And the entire mood of the episode changes. Wayne isn't his, usual snippy self with his smart comments. Norma immediately goes to call the mom and see what she can do. Jack just puts his hand on his son's shoulder.
One of my favorite parts. He's got his hand kind of on his neck, kind of pushing him into the house because he's going to go get him, like you said. And then it just slides to his shoulder and it's really a nice touch.
Yeah.
That little part there.
Yeah, because all these kids know each other in the neighborhood, and the fact that Brian's older doesn't mean that, Kevin obviously doesn't know him and hasn't been a part of his life. And, he knows the relationship between, his son and the sister of the deceased. And it's just such a nice, scene, and how quickly the dad's, just his anger melts away and he's more concerned about what's going on in the neighborhood. And then, of course, this scene to finish the show, where he goes for a walk to try to clear his mind and try to wrap his head around the things that are happening. And he walks to Harper's Woods where, him, Paul, and Winnie would play as kids. And he finds Winnie sitting alone on a rock, just, kind kind of rocking slowly back and forth. And, he goes over and he needs to apologize for what he said in school earlier. He sees her as, his friend as well, and wants to have compassion for her, in this horrible time after losing her brother. And, he takes his coat off and wraps it around her to try to keep her warm, and, leans in and gives her this kiss. But then after the kiss is over, then they like hug, and that, they go from being these kids who are, all the hormones racing through their bodies and wanting to experience these new things, to really just going immediately back to being friends, and one friend trying to comfort the other. And it's such a sweet.
Well, and they're playing the music again. When a Man Loves a Woman is playing.
Mm-hmm.
It's really sweet.
Yeah.
And this, it's obviously a lot going on there, but that's another thing I loved, because, and we were all three of it. We were definitely, into girls and trying to get in middle school. You're trying to get your first kiss and everything. You're trying to get your first kiss. And so I just, that scene was great. And honestly, Winnie there kind of reminds me in some ways of the girl that I was into in middle school. So, again, in a different dimension, that could have been me and us.
So I remember when we watched, Friends, and that kiss between Ross and Rachel at the coffee shop, and, the audience reaction just going crazy, and how that was like such a big deal in, sitcom history, will they, won't they, and they finally do. This kiss for the 12-year-old or 11-year-old Brian Gifford was like a watershed moment, because it's like, you're in that moment, and that's really, if you've got a girl that you like, that's what you want to be doing. And it was so sweet, and it was so innocent, and that scene stuck with me, and it's
he handles it perfect. He does it perfectly, and he does. He's not an awkward 12-year-old in that moment, and he just he's very comforting, doesn't try to be overly aggressive. He knows just exactly how to handles it perfectly. I that's where I probably would have messed up,
right? But it's just such the way they go from that into that hug.
You want to get out of here?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Let's get out of here.
He doesn't pull a Jacob and go with that one. Yeah. So one of the funnier scenes, I think maybe one or two episodes later, they're at the Coopers for the reception after Brian's funeral, and Norma tells Kevin to go take this plate of food over to Winnie.
That's the next episode, because I watched that.
It is. And he goes over there, and there's some line about where he goes, grab her, squeeze her, kiss her on the lips. Like he's on the inside, he's going absolutely nuts. He just wants to, have that moment again with her, and but he's doing all he can to hold it all inside. And then you've got the ghost of Brian Cooper standing, behind Winnie, saying, I'm not even in the ground yet, and all you can think about is jumping my sister. It's such a funny little, show with those fantasy sequences. They do just a great job with it. So
I do want to come back to when he's in trouble with the principal, and it was after he had thrown the apple, and so now the mom is there at the school and the principal. The way he handles it conveys it perfectly, and it takes you back to those times when you were in trouble and you just didn't want to say anything. You're like, I don't know.
Yep.
And the way that he acted, Fred Savage was a fantastic actor. The way he handled that was exactly how I would have handled that exact situation.
Agreed.
Well, and his lips don't even move when he gives his short little responses. That's the way it is. You got all those things going through your head, in the narration of I'm mad, I'm confused, I'm just pissed off, and you just want to say all these things, but you can't, because that's just going to get you into more trouble, and you just give the minimum answer that you can.
Yep.
So that's another great little scene there. Anything else for the pilot episode, fellas?
Nope.
No, other than basically I was bawling at the end of it.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the things I found watching it now is that, you're still trying to remember back to watching it the first time when you were a younger kid. And I rewatched this in college with my buddy McCain. So I was, 19 and watching it over again. But this time now, you're seeing it also through the, kind of the perspective of the adults, and it hits you, differently for sure. So we're going to skip ahead to season 3, episode 20. This episode came out April 24th of 1990. The title of this episode is Goodbye. This is the highest rated episode according to IMDb. The second highest is the finale. This episode also won 2 of the 4 Emmys for the show, 1 in directing and 1 for writing. So this episode revolves around Kevin and his math teacher, Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins was in 3 episodes in this season, episode 2, episode 9, and episode 20. In episode 2, he's a tough but fair teacher, and Kevin generally prides himself in his coursework, whereas Wayne is the kid who's getting, D's and F's. Kevin's like the A student and the B student, and he gets into this math course and he just does not understand algebra and, needs to ask for help. It's a lovely ending to that episode where it's him and his dad's in his room and he's helping him, and one of the parts of it is he didn't want to let his dad down because his dad's so proud of him for the grades that he gets, and he needs to ask his dad for help. And it's just quite wonderful. The 9th one, there was a cheating scandal in the class, but Mr. Collins actually roundabout way saves Kevin from failing. And that was, he gains more respect for him there. And then we get into this episode where I love this episode. I can understand why it's so highly rated. This episode is about that one teacher in your life that makes that difference that you remember for the rest of your life, whether it was an elementary, middle school, or high school or college teacher. They're the ones that, you always go back to as that favorite teacher. So one of the lines I wrote down for this episode is Paul is in this teacher's advanced math course, and Paul gets an A- on a test, and he's very upset about it. And other kids can't understand why. And Kevin's line, the narrator's line is, A's just come to him like hives. Because, of course, Paul is, allergic to absolutely everything in the world. So, yeah, so I don't know. You guys got anything to start off on this episode?
Well, there was a quote right off the bat. You were taught, it's teachers live in your memory forever. I can't remember if that was written or said, but that was the first thing
I think
wrote
it was
down.
said, yeah, in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. And then this Mr. Collins, I recognized right away. He, speaking of the Brady Bunch, he played Mr. Phillips, Robert Reed, not Robert Reed, Mike Brady's boss in the Brady Bunch movies in the 90s.
Oh, okay.
I knew I had seen him from somewhere, but
he's in other stuff, but that was the one where I recognized him right away. And so if you've seen them, you would know that too. Yep. So he was on the West Wing too, Gifford.
Yeah, one episode of the West Wing. Stephen Gilborn is the actor's name. I believe we lost him in 2009, I think. But
where did he go?
I was going to say the same thing.
He went to heaven. He went to heaven just based solely on his performance in this show. So, Kevin is a C student now in his class. He's worked really hard to get those C's. He's actually kind of proud of himself for getting those C's. But after he sees a note that Mr. Collins had written on one of Paul's papers, basically, good job, Paul, he really craves the adoration of this teacher. So he decides, hey, maybe I should try to get some of that from him. So he goes to the teacher. And I love Mr. Collins because he is so robotic. Everything is just matter of fact. He'd never, you ask him a question, he answers only the question. He doesn't elaborate on anything. Like,
That's how a lot of math teachers are, though. That's why they're math teachers. That's how their
Very
brain
exacting.
operates.
Well, he kind of reminded me of Mr. Anderson as far as like
I thought
very
the
much
same.
to the point. Kind of looks a little like him.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Our science teacher, very just doing what he's supposed to do, and that's about it.
Yeah, and I mean, I went a little Mr. Jacobson too, just because Mr.
Mhm.
Jacobson
Guess I could
was
see
the
that,
math
but-
teacher. But yes, it's a combination of Mr. Anderson and Mr. Jacobson for sure. And then, of course, when
I
it's
think we'll
about
see
that,
those hashtags about this episode later on.
sure. And if it is about that one teacher, of course, for I think the three of us, that one teacher would have been Mr. Hummel. Gave
That's
the most
true.
work of anybody, but he was way more fun. Had more personality in class and
Yes.
made things a little more fun. But you respected him and you wanted to do the best work you could for him, and you didn't mind that it was a boatload of work because
He
you wanted to
prepared
be
you for
proud of you.
college and for life more than any other teacher. I told
For
him
sure.
that actually.
I don't know. I
he
don't
was-
remember it being a boatload of work. It was just.
It was more work than
The
what
big
other
thing was
teachers gave
a
us.
6-page research paper, which seemed like a
Oh,
lot
yeah.
at the time.
We were
Um,
juniors or seniors in high school. My kids in 8th grade are writing a research paper right now.
Well, I know, but at the
Sure.
time, that was the big deal. And
I know it
seemed
was, and I wrote it about baseball and how it was dying. I
Right.
still remember that.
Well, and maybe it was that English was not my strongest. I'm not that great of a reader, being illiterate, and so maybe that was part of it. I just didn't like the reading assignments and having to write stuff, and so that might have been more of it, more of the subject matter. But of course, he was the best. But yeah,
The best.
you want you see Kevin wanting to gain his approval, so Mr. Collins suggests to him, hey, why don't you come to my classroom after class, after school, and we will work on getting ready for this midterm exam, because Kevin doesn't think he can get A's, and you see this teacher really pushing for a student, sees a student that wants to do better and just wants to grab hold of that desire and push him and to do better, even though he doesn't think he can. What I like is when he shows up to Mr. Collins' class and says, okay, let's do this. And just the smallest smile comes across Mr. Collins' face. Like, yes, I got one. Like we got a kid who's going to put forth the effort to really learn this stuff. And it's funny because, Kevin starts thinking like, we're getting to know each other. He gets to know me. I get to know him, even though all they do is talk about math, and
He's becoming attached to him. Yeah.
there's a point where he goes, we're basically on a first name basis. And of course, right after that, they call each other Mr. Collins and Mr. Arnold, which, is a kind of a fun little thing there. So as the episode continues, one day after school, Kevin goes to the classroom to continue getting tutored, and Mr. Collins isn't there. His room's locked. He catches up to him in the parking lot. Mr. Collins needs to go to an appointment. Won't be able to help him that day. Won't be able to help him the next day. Suggests that Kevin continues his studies on his own, and the test is on Friday. To which Kevin's very hurt by this. Thought they had a kind of a deal, and he says, I thought you were my friend. And Mr. Collins turned, and you can tell he's really hurting that he's not helping the student, but he's able to get out. Not your friend, Mr. Arnold, your teacher. And it's just it's tough because he's got to go. He's got something going on. And of course, Kevin's hurt by this. So the day of the test, he sits there, he takes his test, and he writes all these smart ass comments for answers like, factor this and who cares and, whatever, because he's going to get
Seemed a
back
little
at this
over the
teacher.
top.
Yes, a little bit. But we found Kevin is a little over the top, throwing apples into the.
Yeah, no, it does. It's still, though. That's quite the move, though.
He's an emotional kid after
Yeah.
he'd been working so hard to at
Right.
least try.
So he
Could've
gets up at the end of class. Everybody else is gone, and he turns his test in. And the look of hurt on Mr. Collins' face when he sees what Kevin has written on this test, it's heart-wrenching. And, Kevin just gives him this look like, hey, whatever, man, you walked out on me. And as he's walking out, Mr. Collins tries to get him back and he calls him Kevin. And that's just such a cool, like he really wants to reach out to this kid because he feels like he let him down and wants the kid to do better. So, of course, Kevin's feeling great. This is Friday. He's like, yeah, I stuck it to the man. Goes home that weekend. And then, of course, he starts thinking about it and, doesn't have a real good weekend, decides to get to school on Monday and heads to the teacher's lounge to talk to his teacher and try to explain and maybe apologize. And the vice principal comes to the door and explains to him that Mr. Collins has passed away over the weekend. And I mean, when you get that news, like as a viewer, like your heart just sinks because that this kid can't do the thing that's right by this teacher that's tried to help him. And then to make it worse is they say he tells him that it was his heart. So as that 13-year-old now at this point, you're thinking, oh my God, I killed this guy, broke his heart, being the jerk that I am. So
again,
that
tears streaming down my face practically.
Oh my God. I mean, can't
both
stop.
of these episodes, you're trying to kill me, Gifford.
In the previous
they're
episodes
so
that
good.
this guy was in, were there hints that he was like sick
No.
or anything?
No, and even in this episode, like I couldn't really, like
I
he
kind
didn't-
of
that's
started
why
to
I don't
think
know. You
about,
guys,
well, what are these appointments about? What's going to happen
Yeah, but
here?
I guess so. You guys really were affected, and that's great. I wasn't as much because it just felt like it was so sudden and just thrown in there that it was like, wow,
Sure.
we're really going like that. So I don't know.
It was so sudden. Brad didn't even care.
I cared, but it didn't impact me like you. I wasn't crying or anything. So, and I
Well,
cry more
and-
than anybody.
Well,
That's
and
true. You do.
what's even worse is the real tear jerkers coming yet. So much like in episode 9, where Collins kind of bails Kevin out of getting caught in this cheating, he had pulled Kevin's test and thrown it away and then put a blank test in the packet with everybody else's and just put his name on it. And now he's called to the classroom. The vice principal says, hey, we need a grade. Your test must have been misplaced by Mr. Collins. He graded him the weekend that he died. And he holds up this test with Kevin's name on it. And Kevin sits down and he just absolutely kills it. He talks about how, like, I'm on my own now. I'm going to do this for him. And, he hands the test in, says it's an A. And then as he's walking out the door, he turns, looks at the desk and just says, good job, Mr. Collins. And I mean, good Lord, I am a puddle in my living room watching this. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. He does what he can to try to make up for it and make his teacher proud. And oh my God, I mean, I'm tearing up right now. Like,
Yeah,
it's
you're
such
selling
a
it.
great episode.
It's funny that the one who's the least affected by this is the teacher.
Right?
I,
He's
Like,
dead.
yeah, this is how
I've
my
seen too
students
much.
treat me.
This is not the way it is in real life.
I'd be better off, is what Brad says.
Right? Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
lucky bastard.
I think when Tony DeMira killed Brad last season, that it took his humanity with it. So yeah. he
No, but I
came
mean,
back.
and it's a good episode, and listening to you talk about it, I totally get why you like it or why you picked it and everything. I just,
Mhm.
as I'm watching, I was kind of curious why you picked it, and when I saw that it was the highest rated too, I'm like, really? I mean, because most of the other characters aren't even in it, so
Right.
you'd think that the highest rated would be something that's more like, I don't know, got Winnie and Kevin in it or more of that. So
Right.
I guess it really did stand out to people, and that's great.
Well, and
There
when
was
I
a
was
moment in
thinking,
the
If only teachers were given that much respect in real life, that'd be great.
Yeah. exactly. Right. Pete, what were you going to say?
There's a moment earlier in the episode that I thought it was important that you skipped over. It's when he's at home. He's actually starting to work hard, and he actually works, and he gets a C, which for him is good. And
Wait,
he
it's a
goes,
B.
I thought
Right?
it was a C. It was a
When he
C.
says ta-da,
C first. Yeah.
He goes, hey, Dad, I got a C. And then thought his dad was going to be proud of him. And the line that he says is, well, there's nothing to be ashamed of.
Right. Yeah.
So
I
it's
liked
like
when he
very
got
deflating.
when he got the B and he's trying to get something from Mr. Collins, and you hear Daniel's, he doesn't do it, but Daniel Stern goes, he holds up the B and he goes, ta-da!
Right.
And he ta-da again. That was the best part, I thought. And the other guy
Right.
goes, and the teacher just goes, yes, I know.
Yeah. Right. So matter of fact, just yep, that's a B. You know. So I think it's just such a great episode. And when I was thinking about, so when I picked this for this year, this episode came to mind, and I was
So you remembered this one from like way back?
yes, yep.
Okay.
So I was hoping it was from 1990. Obviously, we covered the pilot, and I think it we should have tonight, even though it's not from 90. But I was really happy to see that this one was from 90, so I could include it here because it's a great one, and for me, it definitely stood out. So, you guys got anything else for that
I
episode?
enjoyed. I watched probably about 10 episodes. I watched the finale too to see, partially as research for an upcoming episode of us.
Mhm. Yep.
But so like I don't think I like it as much now as I did as a kid, but I did enjoy watching it. Like I feel like I got enough out of it. I wouldn't watch the whole series, but it was really fun to go back and relive it again. It's
Yep.
what we like to do.
Yeah, it's all about nostalgia. So,
Awesome pick. That's what we love on this show.
yes, we do. So we'll move on to our top 5 for this evening. Our top 5 is coming of age TV shows or movies. So kind of a broad definition. We'll have some shows that some people may go, I don't think so, but hey, it's our opinion and we're sticking to it. So in a ceremony before this episode, it was decided, of course, my episode, so I'll go first. Brad will go second, and Pete will get that third pick for the evening.
Wah, wah.
So
I'm really curious where you're going to go. Well, unless you're going to pick this show, but if not, I'm really curious what you're going to pick for your number one.
I'm picking this show. I mean,
Oh, you are? Okay.
This is the best, in my opinion, coming of age TV show or movie that's ever been created, and I will die on that hill along with Mr. Collins.
Well, I am going to pick maybe the best movie ever created, and that is The Karate Kid.
Nice. See, and I didn't even have that on my list. That's why
Seriously?
That's why I love these lists, because it's just stuff that I completely forget that is.
I know. I mean, I'm sure
okay.
you're going to name other ones too, but like that one, I thought we'd all have high on our list for sure.
I'm going
Right.
to ask this question because I had on my list. I had Cobra Kai / Karate Kid as one line item. So
Well, you can split that.
can you split that, or is it because it's
Well,
the same
if you want to
story?
take, if you think, see, I wouldn't consider
No.
Cobra Kai really coming of age, but if you want to take it, go ahead. I
Oh,
just took
really?
The Karate Kid.
I'm well, it's not my pick right now. Maybe
Okay.
I'd take it later, but
Well, I mean, no, I get it, the kid's part is, but I feel like it focuses so much on Johnny and
Danny,
what this, yeah,
Daniel.
that, but it is,
What's-
and he can pick it
what's-
if he wants to pick it. That's fine.
Alright.
sure.
I-
All right,
well,
Pete.
the number one on my list is still on the board, so I'm going to take The Breakfast Club.
Yes.
Ah, Pete with the
That's
Breakfast
not
Club.
The Breakfast Club. Breakfast Club.
That's
I'm gonna-
high on mine.
I'm going to get my top 2. I'm going Stand By Me.
That's my number 3.
See, and I like that one, and we did it recently. Wouldn't be high on my list, but after watching it again, I really enjoyed it.
I think it fits this category as well as any movie that's out
As
there.
well as any-
Well,
Or
that's
as
what
any
it's.
TV show.
It's like one of the
perfectly-
definitive coming of age movies.
Yes.
Yep.
And so everything, by the way, that we've said so far, we have an episode on. So if you like
Yep.
what you're hearing, you can find them. And I will add another one to that list, which I think is maybe the definitive comedy coming of age movie, and we all know I love it. 16 Candles.
Nice. Got that one as well. Oh, I
See, the
should
thing
take
is,
off my
when I
list.
was defining these, I'm thinking like, so coming of age, do they have to like,
Sure.
pass time? Because like 16
Right,
Candles and The
movies are
Breakfast
tough.
Club, they're one day, but
Yeah.
they're still there. I mean, they
No,
are.
but-
Everybody
Nah,
would say
that-
they're.
Come on.
Characters grow in one day, though.
They
do,
I mean,
they do.
The characters
sure.
become. It's when
But
A
it's
girl
fun to make
becomes
the
a
list
woman,
because
and-
as I'm making the list, I had to like define it and think about what it means. And so,
Mhm.
because obviously these are considered coming of age movies.
Correct. Yep, I had that on my list for sure.
All right. I am going to go with Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
I didn't even have Fast Times on mine.
All right. That is the first one we don't have an episode on yet. Maybe
That's a
Sorry.
great pick.
ruin
That
it.
is a great pick. So on my list, I have 3 things highlighted, and I am going to take the third one that is highlighted. I'm going with The Sandlot.
Ah.
Ah,
Again,
I didn't have that one.
A narration with kids as they grow. Same with Stand By Me. Same with Wonder Years. I don't know. I must just
Huh.
love that format.
I'm surprised I didn't have that one even listed. I that's what I missed. Oh, great. I should have taken this earlier. Okay, I'm getting the next one on my list, which I didn't really have ordered perfectly.
No, I don't have anything.
Jesus, Freaks and Geeks, guys. That's mine.
Yeah, I figured you.
I knew
were
you were gonna have
definitely
that.
I
going
got
that
lucky
way.
to get that because I almost missed it.
Courtney was yelling at me not to pick that one because I'm not a big enough fan. But I'm like, I've watched enough of. I really do enjoy
Well,
it.
you watched
so-
it once, right? I mean, you've seen the show.
Yeah, but it's
So
not
you
like
can-
something I've go back and watch over and over.
All right, Pete.
Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
There you go.
In a different way, but I think it fits the
Yeah,
category.
see, that's the
Oh.
one I eliminated because I feel like he doesn't really change. He's just,
But it's
he gets
about
every-
Cameron.
No,
Cameron
I know.
does.
You're right, and
Yep.
that's fine. I'm saying from my own personal list, as I was trying to whittle it down, I took it off.
Sure. Oh, boy.
Every John
Okay.
Hughes movie is a coming of age movie, basically.
Right.
so.
All right. I'm going Dirty Dancing.
Oh wow, I
Wow.
didn't have that one. I suppose it is, huh? I haven't seen it
Yeah.
enough to remember. I
It
wouldn't even-
absolutely is.
Oh, she came of age during that movie.
Oh brother.
Anyway,
Anyway.
Okay, what's next on my list? You guys aren't taking mine, so I can just take
Yeah,
everything. Well,
There's a lot of great ones.
I might as well take another one that we just did recently, Pleasantville.
Oh, I didn't have that on my list. Great.
I think that fits the definition pretty great.
Yep.
all right. I'm gonna go with Juno.
Oh yeah, I
Good
got that one down the
pick.
list there.
Oh, last pick.
Not a lot of competition on this one. It's like everybody has their own list.
Well, you guys are taking a lot off the list that I've got.
But you said you had like your first 3 or 4 right off the list there.
Yeah, I did. The 3 I had highlighted, I'm glad I got those. I'm gonna go because it covers more ground as a TV show than the movie. I'm gonna pick, so I'm gonna go with the TV show. I'm gonna go Stranger Things.
That was on my list.
I almost missed, and it's not necessarily the number 1, but the number 1 on my list because I started taking those right after it. Here's another one we have one of our very earliest episodes on. Maybe the greatest coming of age movie in the last 20 years, the
I know
way,
what
way
you mean.
back.
Yeah, I knew you were
Just-
gonna take that.
I told
I mean,
Courtney I
that
was gonna
has
take
to
that
be on my
just
list.
to piss you off. I had it on my list, and she goes, "Don't you dare!"
I could go sit down and watch everything I just picked straight through without sleeping and just be the happiest. This is such a great list. Why?
It is.
It's so great.
Got another one that we've done an episode on. All right. I'm going with
That's-
Dazed and Confused.
That's what I was gonna pick.
I'm surprised Gifford didn't pick that.
Well, it was between that and Stranger Things. And I love Dazed and Confused. It's on my list because you have the older kids and you have the younger kids. So even though it's only one day in the life of, they, you got 2 different age groups in there. So that's a lot of fun. Great pick, Pete. I love that you picked it.
I had
Thank
like
you.
15 more here in consideration. You want to go
Go
first, Giff, since you picked
Let's
it?
hear 'em.
Oh,
I
sure.
think. All right.
These I got Superbad, Almost Famous. Brad and I talked about Coda.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
that you got the right one. I
Yep.
just thought, and because that's again, that's about the whole family, but it is about the girl, and it is
Yes.
totally about her figuring out who she is. That movie is so freaking awesome. Coda.
Yep. Boys in the Hood,
Yes, I got
Oh.
that.
Growing Pains, Who's the Boss? I was putting this list together, and Courtney goes, "What about Little House on the Prairie?" I watched it, and it's definitely coming of age.
Pass.
Sure.
American Pie, I put
Yep,
on
that's on my
there.
list.
And then I think the last one I'll mention is Meet the Robinsons. I've
wanna
mentioned
go,
that
Pete?
cartoon. on
I'll go
there
last.
Sure.
sometimes.
Ones that haven't been mentioned, I had Goonies.
Oh,
I
yeah.
had, which is an ultimate coming of age movie when you think about it. Heathers, Saved by the Bell, I had
Yeah.
on my list, and
Actually, I don't
Young
have that on my list.
Young Sheldon, because we've been watching that recently.
I just realized the reason I didn't put Saved by the Bell on here because I feel like none of those kids changed. They were just idiots all the way through. Even though I love that show and watched it all the time.
They went all the way to college.
Yeah, except for that drug phase. Yeah. Okay, here's what I got. So another great recent show on Netflix was Atypical, about the kid with autism, and Jennifer Jason Leigh was his mom, and Michael Rappaport was. That's such. Have you watched that? Either one of you?
No,
Oh,
I think
you-
Courtney has.
Gifford, you would love it. I'm sure Pete would like it too. I've mentioned this show lots of times. Again, not a lot of growth in this one, but the In-Betweeners from England is
I
a
thought
great
of that one last night, and I didn't put it on my list.
show and movies.
Yep.
Big. Nobody said Big, which that was one where I was like, but he's actually the person who's coming of age, even though he's in the adult body. It's so
That's a great one.
That's exactly what he does. I had to list Anne Frank, just her diary, any show about Anne Frank. We're about to read that in my class again, and I love everything about that. Well, except the fact that there's Nazis and they die.
Great qualifier, Brad.
Wow.
Nobody would have caught on to that one if you didn't say it.
The Man in the Moon with Reese Witherspoon. My first love of her is on here. A great movie from a couple years ago called 8th Grade. If you've never seen that, it's wonderful. The Perks of Being a Wallflower is another great one. Kenneth Branagh had a movie, I think it was the same year as Coda, that was up for Best Picture, called Belfast, about a kid in Ireland growing up. It's so great. Oh my God, I love that movie.
Oh, I watched that.
Did you? It's in black and white. Yeah. The Graduate is an old classic.
Sure.
I got Simon Birch on here. I brought that one up before. Lady Bird was a really awesome movie.
Yep.
Last year at Christmas, we saw The Fablemans. I love The Fablemans. Boyhood is probably the ultimate coming of age movie because it has an actual kid who's showing his years growing up. Harry Potter, anyone?
Yeah, Pete. I mentioned that to Courtney last night. I'm like, well, Pete's gonna take Harry Potter.
Didn't even cross my mind. I didn't even think of it.
That's funny. And then I have
That
two
is
more
funny.
on Netflix shows. I don't know if you've watched either. Ginny and Georgia. It's a big one everybody loves right now. That's a great show. And then my son watched the show Heartstopper, which I've watched with him, and that's great too. So those are a couple more. So, and I cut a lot off, but those were the ones that I included.
Well, I thought you would have Popular,
I
and
forgot about that
Courtney
one.
was wondering if you watched enough 90210.
Oh,
You
Jesus.
thought maybe 90210 would be
Well,
one of your guys.
that would deserve a mention at least, yes.
Yeah. No Cosby Show.
Again, I don't like Growing Pains and Who's the Boss. For me, they're family shows and they're about the adults as much as the kids, so I wouldn't include them as a way to narrow it down.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously Theo is a great character.
There were
and there's a lot
certain aspects of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could have picked it if you wanted to be on the Cosby Show train. Go ahead. I think that we're past that.
Well, I didn't watch.
I don't know if you want that on your resume, though.
Yeah,
I had Cosby Show and Saved by the Bell. Just if I assumed you guys would bring them up, but if you didn't,
I forgot. I think like I said, I think I had Saved by the Bell and I took it off. So I'm glad Pete brought it up.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Gifford, who's your favorite coming of age band?
Damn Yankees, coming of age.
No, I think it's Preacher Row.
That's mine too.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
That is the right answer.
Excellent.
If
Here
not
they
Church
are.
Pencil, it's Preacher Row.
Okay. Bye.
Bye,
Thanks
everybody.
for listening.
don't you fear? No one's here to comfort me. Sorry for what I have done. Sorry that your song is gone. 7 steps and it will be my last. And start to me on my back. I turn and I look to you. I'm scared but there's nothing I can do.